Prime Minister always goes to the root of the matter. I think it is in the interest of the world, especially the developed world, to work with India and work with the other developing countries.
I think they're very good statements. Prime Minister Modi actually sort of highlighted the most important issues that is facing the world today.
India is in its own right emerging as a leader.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's statement has been very well received.
Prime Minister Modi's appeal at this meeting of the G20 is very timely and appropriate.
India has been taking a, more prominent role in international affairs recently.
Which is spot on. Prime Minister always goes to the root of the matter, and that is what he did today. Ukraine crisis cannot be resolved through the barrel of the gun, period. The only way it can be done is through the negotiating table. Now, the longer you resist coming to the negotiating table, the longer will be the misery. So there is no other way but to bring about a ceasefire and give diplomacy a chance, and that is what that's the only solution. I was particularly struck by PM's comment about energy security of India being in the global interest, and the reason is as follows. Today, India is the third largest consumer of energy in the world. But, if you look at the per capita consumption, it is 1/11th of the US, 1/5 of China. And we are going to be the largest country in the world. So our growth story has just about started. Now, look at two scenarios. One, we are doing what we are doing, which is we are becoming energy efficient. We, by 2030, 50% of our energy or electricity will be renewable. We are taking all possible measures to reduce energy intensity. And by 2070, we'll be carbon neutral. So that is one thing. Or we kind of pollute the world like, the top polluters are. Look at what havoc it would cause. So while India, even as a developing country, is doing whatever it takes to bring about, be climate compliant or mitigate climate change, I think it is in the interest of the world, especially the developed world, to work with India and work with the other developing countries.
I think they're very good statements. Prime Minister Modi actually sort of highlighted the most important issues that is facing the world today. And the way he put it also was in the right context. Like, this is, as he's been saying earlier also, this isn't the time for war. This is the time for diplomacy, for dialogue, and highlighting the impact that this is having on the global south. So that's very important. It's not only, the whole world is of course being affected, but the global south is being even more terribly affected by the food shortages, the fuel issue. So he mentioned this and the fertilizer shortages. Plus, he's also put it in a historical context. He mentioned about World War II and how at that time leaders got together to sort of chart their way out of it. So he's mentioned that as this is the coming together moment where the 20 of the most important leaders of the world are together, and maybe they can find a way out of this.
The Prime Minister, when he left for Bali, he identified a number of areas which will be the focus as far as India is concerned. And of course, food and energy security really comes on the top. And it is on the top because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Because although the world was undergoing a large number of challenges as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, but it was coming to grips with that. But the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which has now been going on for the last 9 months, that has really thrown the whole world into turmoil and turbulence, and particularly in the areas of food, in the areas of energy, in the area of fertilizers. So I think both of these are related. And so the Prime Minister spoke about ending also the Russia-Ukraine conflict, because as a direct outcome of that, we will be able to see that the situation on food, fertilizer, energy security will be eased. And of course, related to that are also issues like climate change, like recovery as far as the global economy is concerned, and also health, because these are issues which the G20 leaders are going to discuss. And the last but definitely not the least is the digital transformation of the world and use of digitization, which India has done very effectively. That is also something that India is going to showcase, India is going to focus on at Bali.
So also India is going to take over the presidency from Indonesia. How do you see India's chairmanship?
Oh, absolutely. I think India is in its own right emerging as a leader. Leader not only of the global south, because India is also a voice of the global south, and that is why you would recall that India has invited 9 other countries, smaller countries, which are not members of the G20, like Bangladesh, Nigeria, Egypt, Mauritius, Netherlands, etc., so that the voice of the global south and the smaller countries is also heard.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi's statement has been very well received at this 17th Group of 20 Summit. And this session was for energy security and food security. And the whole world is now suffering because of 2 problems. One is COVID, and the world is in the recovery phase, and also because of the Ukraine crisis, which has disrupted global supply chains. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a very fervent appeal that the world should go back to a era of ceasefire and diplomacy as far as Ukraine is concerned, because the first step towards any kind of agreement is ceasefire, and only then there can be diplomatic negotiations. And second, Prime Minister Modi has been talking about the interests of the global south. The developing countries of the world are the worst victims of the disruptions in global supply chains. And in fact, Prime Minister Modi said that the global supply chains are in ruins, both for food and fertilizers, because quite a large percentage of fertilizers for world trade are supplied by Ukraine as well as by Russia. So his focus was on how to protect, how to insulate global south from these disruptions which are coming, because first they came because of COVID crisis and now because of Ukraine war, so that the world's supply chains both for food and for energy remain undisturbed.
Important this G20 summit is, given the fact that India will host the next G20, it will take the chairmanship of that. How important is this summit for the world and for India specifically? And PM Modi is also going to hold some bilateral with key world leaders. What will you say on that as well?
This 17th summit is being held in a background of recovery and economic recovery. And the motto or the slogan for this summit is recover together, recover stronger. And it will be a continuation of economic recovery when India assumes the chairmanship on 1st of December, and India will also host the 18th G20 Summit in November next year. The major issues before India would be how to reform the global institutions, because Prime Minister said clearly, and everybody knows, that the United Nations has not been very successful in dealing with the current crisis. Whether it was COVID, WHO was not very effective, and in Ukraine the situation, really United Nations is not anywhere.
I think it's very important that the Ukraine war should stop as soon as possible. It's caused disruptions in global supply chains, food security, energy security, and before that also a shipping crisis. So we've seen all that happen, and the vulnerable countries of the global south really need this war to stop so that they can recover. As it is, many of them were suffering from the pandemic, and we are still seeing the after effects. So Prime Minister Modi's appeal at this meeting of the G20 is very timely and appropriate.
The speech was good and the bilaterals are important, but at the same time, we should not overrate the India's ability to play a mediatory role. Because don't forget, what is required is, let me make it very clear, not a mediatory role between Ukraine and Russia. What is required is a mediatory role between Russia and the United States. And there, I don't think anyone can play any mediatory role. The two sides have to agree to talk to each other, and they have been talking. So as regards Ukraine war, as of now, it is destined to continue. But we all pray for, hope for a ceasefire. But, you can only talk to the horse, to the stream. You can't make it drink.
Also, what will you say on India hosting the next G20 summit? How important is this summit for the world and specifically for India?
Well, it is important for India because India has been taking a more prominent role in international affairs recently. So it's important for India.